basically what I think everyone wants to know. Are aliens real?
I think they are, but I don't know that they are. And this is a view that gets me in trouble. I managed to upset, I think, both ends of the spectrum when it comes to the UFO community, because taking that view, I don't go far enough for the true believers, but I go too far for the skeptics.
Yeah.
But I always, in my Ministry of Defense career, which was 21 years and which encompassed a lot of other things aside from UAP, a lot of things that I did ranging from finance policy through to counterterrorism, whatever it was, a lot of what I did was being a briefer. So I was the subject matter expert on various things, and it was my job to then translate all the data into clear briefs for senior people, including the politicians, to make policy decisions based on my advice. So I had to always differentiate between what I know and what I think. Now, that's not to say you won't be put on the spot and say, hey, come on, you must have an opinion, but you have to be very clear when it is that you're talking about what you know and what you think. So that's a very long-winded way of saying I'm pretty sure there are aliens out there and maybe coming down here, but I'm not one of these people who is going to sit here and say, yeah, there's definitely like crashed spaceships and dead aliens in the Pentagon basement somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately for you, as the old quote goes, the only thing in the middle of the road is roadkill. Yeah. Right. That's the problem with having a nuanced take, is that everyone gets pissed off about it. But I think that's reasonable, and that's kind of why I'm excited to talk to you. I feel like you have a very grounded view and a nuanced view on this topic specifically.
Yeah, and I've been accused of being constantly on the fence, and I say no. I take a data-led approach to this, and therefore, if somebody comes to me with story A, and I look into it and I think it's BS, I will say that's BS. And if someone comes to me with story B and I think it's credible and there's some good pieces of evidence to support it, I will put my sort of stamp of approval on it and say, hey, this looks good. And people will say, oh, well, he says one thing to one lot and one. No, I take this on a case-by-case basis, which is really the only way to go.
So with that groundwork created, in your opinion, purely in your opinion, do you believe that aliens, quote unquote, have visited Earth?
I am open-minded on the possibility. I realize that I'm sounding like a civil servant.
No, I like the diplomacy.
I think there is some, I don't know, intriguing evidence, but no definitive, you can take it to the bank proof.
Right.
I mean, when you look at, for example, some of the material that the US government itself has put into the public domain recently, or some of the things that have been leaked, but which the DoD have subsequently said, yes, this is official US military footage. So we've all seen, for example, those videos of the US Navy jets, the tic-tac, the go-fast gimbal, all that. That sort of thing. The report published in, I think, June 2021, the preliminary assessment from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which talked about some of these objects demonstrating things like signature management, those sorts of things which say there's a technology behind some of this, and that technology in terms of things like its speeds, maneuvers, accelerations, seems to go beyond the cutting edge of anything we've got. There's always a debate, of course, what do we have, what do adversaries have that push the boundaries of that, but seems to go beyond the cutting edge of our own tech. That sort of thing, I think you bring that to the table and I say that's evidence, and overlay on that the pilot testimony that we have from people like Alex Dietrich, Ryan Graves, Dave Fravor, the radar operators like Kevin Day. And you've got this layered approach that you've not just got a single thing. And again, the June 2021 ODNI report stressed this, that it's the verification, the independent corroboration. So it's not just the pilots saying, we saw this. It's tracked on radar. It's filmed on forward-looking infrared. You've then got the paper trail of government documents laying that out and trying to analyze it. So that, I think, is some pretty intriguing evidence, but it's not proof.
Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry to interrupt this amazing program, but I need a little bit of help. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can probably see our subscriber number right down here. And if you're able to, it would mean the world if you could subscribe. That is the best way to support this show, because when you subscribe, I'm able to show it to potential guests or to different brands and stuff like that. And it really, really helps grow the show, get us cooler guests, have cooler conversations, and it helps everything so, so much. So if you don't mind, thank you so much. Let's get back to it. Right. I think that's a completely reasonable and nuanced answer. And this is, I feel like the table is set. There's possibility that aliens exist and we're open to them coming to Earth. And in your opinion, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that has been released both from the US government as well as the British government to suggest that there might be technology that's interacting with humans that we're not aware of what it is or where it comes from.
Yes. So now, when you take it then,
please.
I just, while it's in my head, when you take it the next step and say, well, what about the opinions of people like David Grush who've said, no, we have hardware. There are crashed and largely intact craft and, as he puts it, biologics.
Right, non-human biologics.
Yeah, that's binary. I mean, you can look at the UFOs and you can say, well, there's a whole spectrum of possibilities with that. Misidentifications, hoaxes, delusions, sensor errors. PSYOP.
Sure.
Black program tech. But with those claims, they're either true or they're not. And that's why that represents, I think, the best way to determine whether this is true or not. Let Congress give them a push, but do their job and get into those very specific quotes and say, well, look, those allegations that there are crash retrieval programs, that there are reverse engineering programs, that there's crashed ships and bodies, it's either true or not. And if it's true, it's got to be somewhere and somebody must know about it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, this is fun. Now I think the stage is set. Now I'm curious about you and your background and kind of your work. So you're working within the Ministry of Defense and you've been there for a couple years through the 90s, and then you get put onto this specific task force. What is your thought when you're put into this UAP alien thing? Do you write it off completely or are you open-minded at the time?
I'm open-minded. I have mixed opinions. Part of it is like, wow, the UFO job. I mean, how cool is that? When I joined, one of the things that we all got our hands on was the telephone directory, which is about this thick at the time, and it was a classified document itself because it went into some fairly detailed descriptions. So you would thumb through it and try and pick out the next posting that you wanted. And some of it's really technical. It would say things like air defense, ground environment, radar, over-the-horizon systems for monitoring Soviet and Warsaw Pact, blah, blah, blah. One job just said UFOs. And everyone kind of looked at that and was like, ooh. And I happened to luck my way into that particular job. So part of it was like UFOs. But part of it was like, is this going to be the kiss of death to my career? Because even though you could say that the subject is mainstream now in the US, it wasn't at the time, and certainly isn't now even in the UK. So I thought, is this a little bit of a backwater? So I had mixed feelings going in.
Yeah, and your work prior to that, it had nothing to do with UFOs. I mean, were you personally, were you invested in this topic from a young age? Were you doing a lot of personal research? Had you seen a UFO when you were a kid? Anything like that?
I'd never seen a UFO, still haven't. I had done zero research and investigation. This subject was not on my radar. I had seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'd probably read a couple of books as a teenager, but didn't we all? Like Eric von Daniken, Chariots of the Gods, Charles Berlitz, The Bermuda Triangle, which had a chapter on UFOs. That was it. No, so I came to it pretty cold. And my previous jobs in the ministry, nothing to do with that. My first job was deconflicting the Royal Navy and the oil and gas industry in the North Sea. My next job was doing briefs on Air Force personnel issues, everything from medical and dental through to pay and pensions. Nothing to do with UFOs.
And so how quickly within your time with that task force were you starting to read documents and literature relating to the topic that kind of raised your eyebrows or surprised you or made you curious?
Day one. Oh, absolutely, day one. There was an archive going back really to the Second World War. Even we had the so-called Foo Fighters. So there were some files, I think, from 42 and 43, old Bomber Command files, part of the Royal Air Force, saying how air crews on their way to and from bombing raids over occupied Europe encountered these things, not just balls of light, sometimes structured craft. And so that was the start point. Then you can go through the history of this subject.
Can you expound on that topic specifically, like World War II sightings?
Yeah, I mean, the Foo Fighters, from which the band get their name, were these mysterious objects and balls of light that pilots saw. U.S. pilots, U.K. pilots. It transpired. I mean, at the time, the theory was: is this just some sort of Nazi or Axis secret weapon? Is it just AAA? Obviously, if you're on a bombing raid, there's a lot going on. Searchlights and AAA and all of that.
What is AAA?
Like flak. So ground to air.
Got it.
Fire, and I think anti-aircraft artillery. Is what two nations divided by a common language.
Yeah.
I thought that I had used the U.S. term.
You might have. I might be a dumb guy. I think that's more likely.
So anyway, yeah. So obviously it's very crowded skies. So those were the skeptical theories. But after the war, it transpired that German and Japanese pilots had seen similar things. And like I say, although we don't have much data on this, and there's one very famous blurry black and white picture of an aircraft with some sort of fuzzy ball of light somewhere in it, and people are like, oh, okay, is that it? Well, no, that's not it. These Bomber Command files talk sometimes about objects of like 200 feet in diameter, apparently metallic looking, tracking the aircraft, apparently flying alongside them, but not engaging them in any ways. Well, obviously, if you were a bomber crew in those days, your number one priority was just to get home safely, as many, of course, did not. So this maybe wasn't given the prominence that it should have been at the time, and now it's just a little footnote in the history of World War II. But it was a thing. And going back to the question, from day one, when I delved back through the archives, there was a lot of stuff like that for me to get my teeth into, because for me it was essential. I didn't just want to get the sightings on a kind of day-by-day basis. I was like, well, what's the backstory here? And there was a backstory.
Is that as far back as those documents went to about World War II, or did it go even farther than that?
In terms of what we had, I think World War II was it. And from memory, I think 42 was the first report that we had. There was an earlier wave of sightings in about 1909. And they were, I'm doing this from memory. It's been a long while since I've sort of thought about this.
110 years.
Well, yeah.
It's been a while.
They were called scare ships. Now, obviously, for that word to work, there had to be, obviously, the concept of an airship. So it did overlay with the period when airships were being first developed. But there were reports of mysterious airship-like objects. And I know there's a case actually in the US, Aurora, Texas, I think, from 1897, where it's claimed that one of these things crashed and that small entities were buried and still are in the graveyard somewhere. I think the skeptical theory there, which I incline towards, is that this was a mixture of a sort of practical joke and a publicity stunt by the town, who I think were maybe competing with another town that had just got the railway or something like that. So I don't know. But in the UK, yeah, we did have some strange reports from, like I say, about 1909, 1910, 1911. But they were almost certainly prototype Zeppelins, say. You know, and I don't know. A lot of the records for that period have probably been lost. We may never know the story. So for all intents and purposes, 42, 43 was about as far as it went back for me.